Alrighty, everybody, class is back in session. Welcome back for another lesson in the SwiftUI Firebase chat series. Hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you guys enjoyed the very last lesson. Last episode, I put out a silent video on how to build out the main messages view right over here. And a lot of the code was just pure UI. So that's kind of why I just left it as silent. Most of this is just Swift UI code. It's nothing too hard to follow. It's very straightforward. And once you have all of the code inside of your editor, you can start rendering out in the preview panel on the right side. Eventually, we will have the preview up and ready with the green dot, hopefully. Sometimes it does take a while, but finally, we're here with the preview. Today's video, what are we going to talk about? Well, I wanted to go ahead and dive into the profile picture here in the top left. So the more finished version of our application, you'll see we have Pikachu online with the profile image on the left of it, right? And I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do that in today's video. It's, again, pretty simple and straightforward once you see the code. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to go back into my main messages view right over here. And let's see what happens if I launch this inside of the simulator. The top right, the simulator I have right here is the Pro Max. I'm going to launch this in the Pro. And hopefully I can pull it somewhere right here. You'll see our application looks like this, so nothing too bad. It's in light mode, but dark mode is fine as well. If you guys want to run your application in the simulator, make sure to use the main messages view instead of your app file here. Okay, so moving on, I want to render out the current user being logged in as Pikachu or whatever the user is here. And I also want to fetch the profile image. So how do I do that? Well, one thing you are going to more often than not create inside of your SwiftUI projects is this view model object. And let's see, main messages, view model, and you're going to want to use an observable object. And it's really that easy to see why in just a moment. First thing I will do is inside of my view model, right? I'm going to execute a bit of logic during the, let's say, initialization phase. And the logic will be to fetch the current user. It will be a method that I will momentarily create right below. So you can create it as a private function. It's always a good idea to make a private whenever you sort of want to just give this access only to the class itself. So that's a good idea. Next thing I will do is I'm going to utilize the auth on Firebase Manager shared in the auth right here. So first thing to do is to pull the current user's UID into a variable like this. And as you can see, the current user is optional. So the resulting string that you get from here is optional as well. It's always a good idea to just use a guard statement to get the actual variable outside of your optionals. So I'll use this right here. For those of you guys that are wondering where Firebase Manager shared is coming from, it's from your logged in view here. Here is your Firebase Manager. It's also a good idea to refactor this stuff whenever possible. So in other words, what I will do is I'm going to create a brand new file. I'm sure a lot of you guys know how to do this already. So I'll just create a new file. I'll call this the Firebase Manager. Let's hit create, and here we go. So simply go back to your login view, and then I believe I want to cut from the Firebase area here, or maybe I'll just cut that. And then I'll head back into my Firebase Manager. So good stuff there, just a little bit of refactoring. And you have all this Firebase, all these libraries from Firebase there. So obviously you'll need to import Firebase to make these guys available. And once I do all that, I can go back to my main messages view. I'm going to resume, and this guy should eventually come back to the green. Maybe not. It'll spin for a while. Every time you create a new file, it kind of chokes a little bit, but eventually it'll be right back up like so. All right, so now that we have our UID from our Firebase manager that we just refactored, we can go ahead and fetch the current user that's logged in. In other words, it's Pikachu for our finished version over here. And we have to fetch the current user for whatever we are here. And so I will try to fetch our user by saying Firebase manager, good old autocomplete, Firebase manager.shared, and we'll fetch it from our Firestore database. This guy, you'll have to access wherever you saved your actual user document. And for us, it's in the users right here. And you want to get the actual document with, some kind of path, right? So the path is actually the user ID that we saved during the login phase, or the registration phase rather. And, this is just users and .uid. It might be different compared to whatever your database schema is, but this is a pretty common one here. And then so you want to get the document with some kind of completion, right? I don't think I've ever used this source one, so this guy is going to be pretty straightforward to use. You can also use the new iOS 13 or iOS 15 async methods, but this is kind of new, and I don't think it works for older iPhones just yet. I believe they're going to backport the async libraries, but I'm not sure what the progress is on that just yet. So just to be safe, we'll use this completion block here. And just hit enter, you'll get your snapshot, and then you'll get your potential error like so. Like usual, you'll want to check your error with either a guard or an if let optional binding. So if this happens, we'll say print fail to fetch current user like so. And why don't we just also tack on the error as well. Let's see, if that happens, we'll bail, and that should be okay. Yeah, I believe that's fine. And then finally, what you want to do is to actually get your user off this snapshot there. So this snapshot right here. And this one's pretty easy. You can access it like this, right? I'm going to say data equals snapshot. And you'll get this data dictionary here. Hopefully you guys can see everything. And let's see, else return. Let's type that out correctly. And now that you have your data dictionary right here, what you really want to do is to extract the information from your database. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to print out something like the actual data dictionary itself. So what you can do now is you can load up your simulator or execute this code in your preview. Let's see, we have our view model here. So in order to actually utilize it in your preview or inside your app, you'll need to create an instance of it, and you'll want to use an observed object variable. I'm just going to use VM for view model, and we will just create our view model like this. So nothing too fancy. Again, if you want to make it private, you can do that as well. Now, once you fire up your preview, everything's going to look just the same as you would kind of expect here. Nothing too fancy. We have our custom nav bar up here, and then we have our main body here. So something I'll do just to make sure that things are working correctly is I'm going to say text right here, current user ID. And you'll see the text slowly show up here, right? So let's see, next thing I'll do is I'm going to go back to my view model right here. And to make sure that things are working out correctly, here's what I normally will do. I'll create a couple of published variables right at the very top here. And I'll use something called an error message. And I'll let this guy be an empty string like so. And what I'll do with this error message is, let's say I'm in the fetch current user, right? I'm going to say self.error message is fetching current user. And we'll just do that for now. So inside of my main messages view, right, I'm going to go back to my body, which is this guy right here. I'm going to cut this and put this a little further up above. So that makes this a little easier for the video recording. So for the current user ID right here, I can simply use a string interpolation, and I'll just say vm.error message like so. I'm going to command option P to resume my preview. Now, because I have everything set up correctly, you'll see user ID fetching current user, and that's because I'm kind of hard coding this error message, right? Next thing is to actually make it do what it's supposed to do. And so what I'll do is I'm gonna cut this and I'll paste this down here. And instead of using this, I'm just going to use the UID right here, and you'll see my UID is this S0 UI4U value there, and that's the current user that's being logged in. And a lot of you guys should be seeing this user ID, but if you're not seeing this user ID, that means that you're not logged in as the current Firebase user inside of this preview panel. So you might want to go back to your login view and actually log in first. And the next thing is to, you can also check that inside of this statement here. And let's do our first real error message and could not find Firebase UID or something like that. So, you won't be seeing this message until you maybe flip over to a different simulator here. I don't know how long this mini is going to take to compile, but because I haven't logged in with my iPhone 13 mini in the preview before, you're going to see this message instead of the current user ID. Maybe I'll give it a second to load up here. All right, so the preview is back up. I'm going to hit the stop right here, and then I will hit the play. So maybe I will use the light mode, kind of corresponds to the right side here. So you'll see currently I'm not logged in with the iPhone 13 mini. All right, next thing I'll do is I'm gonna hop back to my iPhone 13 Pro. I'll hit the stop here and I'll hit the play one more time, and you'll see I'm actually logged in as my user here. Okay, so make sure you have that working, and the next thing you want to do is you don't exactly want to use the error message here of the user ID. I'll remove that. That will go away. And then what I'll do is I'm going to use the data inside of line 32. And I will remove that. I will hit the stop and play. And hopefully this should work. Maybe this doesn't have an actual value. So is there a description on here? Maybe the description should work. All right, so nothing looks like it's appearing inside of this guy. So I will use data and we'll put that there. All right, so that's pretty good. It looks like we're not reaching this statement right here. And it looks like we're actually following into this error message. So I'll use this guy and we will just use this here. Okay, so I'm gonna say this right here, and we will use string interpolation, and we'll use the error like so. All right, so once we have that, we should start seeing something inside of this block of code. And it looks like nothing is actually happening. So why might that be? I'm gonna say self.error message equals 1, 2, 3. that should be doing something. And I believe it's actually this right here. Okay, so it looks like 123 is showing up right here. And I believe things should be working. It looks like the snapshot.data right here is actually not getting back a valid dictionary. So we will check this error one more time right here. Self.error message is no data found, and we will just confirm that everything is working. So it looks like snapshot.data is not finding any data on the snapshot. So this might be happening for a couple of different reasons, and I believe the reason is because the currently logged in user isn't saved correctly from like a previous login. So what I'll do is I'm going to hit Command 1 to bring this back up. I'm going to hit the login view here. And again, we are on the iPhone 13 Pro. I'm going to make sure that I'm registered as a proper user inside of the panel here. If you don't see it, just hit the stop and play. You'll see this here. Okay, I'm going to hit the waterfall, and we'll call this the waterfall maybe 1@gmail.com, and then 123 and 123. So this is going to create our user inside of Firestore, and then it's going to upload the image into storage, and it's going to store that image URL inside of Firestore, all kind of sequentially. And once all of that is working, right, we can go back to our main message view, and you'll see the top area, right? The actual message that we have is the data, and it is being kind of printed out using line 42 currently. So if we look at the data, it's a dictionary of the UID, has this R8 Z value, has our email waterfall1, has the profile URL, which is this long URL here. So that's pretty good. This means that we're correctly logged in and we're able to correctly fetch the current logged in user's information. And what I'll do now is I'm going to ingest or decode this dictionary as a kind of a user that we can use for future kind of lessons. And what I'll do is I'm going to call this the struct, and I'm going to call this struct a chat user, and then I will just leave it like that. A couple of things that I'll have available to me as a user is all these properties here. So there's the email, there's the profile image URL, and there's this UID value right here. And they're all strings, so this is going to make it a little easier. So profile image URL. All right, so make sure all your properties here are set up as strings, and you should be good to go. Okay, hit the resume. Make sure things are rendering and running correctly inside of your preview. And looks like things are kind of okay. All right, next thing we are going to head back into our view model fetch. And instead of using this error message, right, I am going to, I guess, what's the word that I'm looking for? Decode. I'm going to say let my chat user equals some kind of chat user here. And I want to construct it using the user ID, the email, and the profile image URL. What you can do is you can get it from this data dictionary in a lot of different ways, but to make it easier, I'll just do this right here. UID, and this guy is the data. We can access the actual UID using this. It doesn't know that it's a string because it's a data is a string to any dictionary. So we'll have to cast it down to a optional string if it's there. If it's not, we'll just kind of leave it and default it to an empty string like so. And then this means that we have the UID right there. All right, a lot of talking, but I hope you guys kind of get the picture here. We'll repeat the same process. So this is the email, get it out of the dictionary, and we'll get the profile image URL equals the same thing there. And hopefully I've spelled things out correctly. And yeah, we'll get the email like that, and we'll also get the profile image URL. So the last thing to do to make sure things are working is to perform this exercise again, and we'll call this the chat user.profile image URL. I am going to check to see if the URL is being printed, and that's exactly what we have. We have this long ass URL there. Okay, so what is the point of fetching the current user and decoding all these properties right here, right? Well, obviously, we want to print out the information in this top area that says username and also this image on the left. So we don't really have a username. So instead of using username, we'll just use the email for the Pikachu thing right there. And how I will do that is I'm going to go back to my view model. And in addition to creating this error message, right, you want to have a hold or a reference on your chat user. So you might be asking, well, what is the property type, right? Well, I'm going to declare it as an optional chat user, and that's because it's going to start off as nil in the beginning. Hit Command Option P, that error will go away and the green dot will come back. All right, so far so good. I'm going to remove this error message at the very bottom here, and that should be coming back as 1, 2, 3, which I don't really care about that. So I'll comment that out as well. Maybe I'll just remove that comment there. Okay, so next up, what we'll do is we are going to go into our current user ID here. And you can go ahead and access the chat user.uid and just use nil coalescing right here. And you'll see it says nothing. You can rename that as user. You'll see that it's going to update. So the last thing to do is to utilize this chat user, and I'll just say self dot to make it easy. Once you have that, the user ID is right here, R8Z. So pretty good stuff. Last thing I'll do is I'm going to use the email for this username right here. So I'll comment this out. And let's go back to our custom nav bar. We have our username right here, corresponds to this there. Some of you guys can probably guess what to do. We're going to say the chat user.email, and we'll just nil coalesce it to the empty string like so. This is an optional chat user. So once we do that, we can have this waterfall one guy. If you want to get rid of the Gmail thing, I think you can replace the occurrences. Is this how to do it? I can't remember exactly what it is, but it should be something like that. And we'll just leave the email as is. Next thing I'll do is, in addition to the email, we can also render out the profile image URL, which is the Pikachu here. And we're going to replace this person.fill system image. You might be asking, how do I easily render out an image inside of SwiftUI, right? Well, there's this image inside of iOS 15 SwiftUI 3.0, but I really dislike the new image SwiftUI view. So instead of using the what I'll call the broken image instead of SwiftUI, I'll use a SDWebImage. And in other words, I'll go ahead and go inside of my package manager. So make sure you're clicked on this right here and this tab. I'm going to click on this. And if you have SwiftUI web image installed already or previously, you'll see it show up right here. Otherwise, go to the SwiftUI, just Google this, and you'll arrive on the GitHub page. And it should look like this URL here. So double click on this and hit the add package. I guess you'll get Xcode to fetch the library that's at that github.com address. And then once it's done, it will allow you to install it inside of your project. It always takes a while. I don't know why, but sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast, but eventually you'll have your package right here. You'll see it synchronizing with your dependencies there. And you'll hopefully see this inside of your project. If you don't, I guess try to fix why it's not showing up. All right. Last thing we'll do is I'm going to head back into main messages view. And again, for this person.fill, we want to use the image loader that comes with, let's see, import. Let's see, I think it's called SDWebImage SwiftUI, and that's what that library is called. Head back down to your person.fill, which is instead of your custom nav bar. Again, this is really easy. You just want to use this SDWebImage class, and it comes with the URL, and the string is this guy. Can you guess what the URL string needs to be? Well, we'll just use the chat user and the profile image URL, which is an optional, so we'll coalesce it down to empty string if that's what happens. And I think we're pretty much good to go here. I'm going to hit Command Option P, or just hit the resume in the top right. This might take a little longer than normal because we just installed the SDWebImage library, but eventually what you'll have is something that, starts rendering out an image on the left side, like so. Okay, that looks pretty good, I guess. First thing to fix is we'll just remove this right here, I suppose. So that's kind of what you have here. You might want to set a frame on the image. 34, is that what we want? And let's see, I think there's always a scale to fill, and that's pretty good. So that's great. I think we want to clip this guy. And then that looks okay. So finally, we'll give this a height of 34 as well. Why am I using 34? I don't really know. I normally use something like 44, which is somewhat recommended. And then finally, we will give this a corner radius of 44 as well. I think that's pretty good. Let's see, maybe give this a value of 50, make it a little larger. So that's what we'll get here. I think this just has to be greater than half of the width value, and you should be fine for the full circle. And there you go. Now you have your image, you have your current user, and everything is kind of working out a-okay. Maybe if you want to render out this circular border overlay, you can go back down to what I showed in the last video. And inside of your messages view, there's this overlay code right here that has a rounded rectangle. So I'll just copy that. Let's see, go back here. I can never remember which modifier to use or where to put it, but it looks like it's gonna work right here. So you start to see this. Maybe I can zoom in. I have a trackpad now, and normally this zoom in works with a trackpad, but it's not working today. So we have that border right there. If you want to give this a shadow, you might as well do that here. Give it a shadow value of 5, and makes it pop out just a little bit, and it's looking like this here. So again, there's this really long email address there. How do I want to remove the long email address? I guess there's this. So if you're getting the email from the dictionary, you can do this, replace occurrences of characters. I believe it's this, right? So I'll do this of that gmail.com with the empty string, and that works. But you're actually removing the @gmail.com from the email here. Okay, so now that you've removed the @gmail.com from the chat user's email right there, you might not want to do that, right? You might want to keep the correct email on this chat user object here. So instead of removing it directly from the actual email property, what I'll do is I'm going to cut that code and head down to wherever my user email is right here. So this one's a little tricky. I'm going to paste that bit of code. And if you have all of your code typed out correctly, it should look like something like this here. For SwiftUI, if you want to simplify your code a little further for these long strings, you can use a let statement. instead. So what I mean is you can do this right here. Just use a let right here. And I believe you can, let me see. I believe it's all of this code here. So I'm gonna say this right here. Let's see. I'm gonna say email equals all of that right here, and you have your email above. So what I'll do is I'll just use the email like so. Yeah. So I noticed that inside of SwiftUI, if you have a really long statement that's evaluating some optionals and you have some nil coalescing like this right here, in the previous versions of SwiftUI, this used to really confuse the compiler. And sometimes I would go to the extent of having a separate function to produce this string value. And it looks like in SwiftUI, the compiler is a little smarter in terms of not choking up on really long, confusing statements like this. So if you're not on the newest version of Xcode yet, make sure to update to at least Xcode 13. I believe 13.1 might be either out right now or it's on beta, but yeah, these statements used to really confuse the Xcode compiler. Okay, so that is all for today's really, really long video. There was a comment in the last lesson that kind of said that they wanted to have me orally kind of narrate what I'm doing in terms of the logic of these lessons, right? If you guys want me to actually narrate and explain all the code, let me know. Sometimes I maybe get a little tired of doing this, like actually live code and explain what I'm doing, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to prepare everything to make sure I can get through the entire lesson without having some kind of bug or just, it takes some preparation. So it's easier for me to just code everything without having to talk about what's going on. But I guess I do understand that sometimes the code is a little too much, and if you're not the actual person that's coding the program, it can be hard to follow. Okay, so again, that's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And again, make sure to let me know what you guys want to see for the live coding. All right, bye.